Deep within human memory lies a name that never ceased to burn. A name that cannot be spoken without casting a shadow over the tale. There was a different disciple, with no prior story, no clear origin. His silence spoke louder than any word, his fate more feared than any death. Among buried codices, forbidden voices, and echoes that refuse to be silenced, a secret emerges. One history tried to hide, a manuscript that defied official memory, a gesture turned into the bitterest paradox, a price counted in cold metal, a land marked by blood that still refuses to forget. This is not a story of simple heroes or common betrayals. It is the fracture where light and darkness collide, obedience and condemnation, the human and the eternal. An echo that crosses centuries, unsettles consciences, and opens questions no one dares to answer. Who was he, truly? An eternal villain, or the dark stone that upheld the architecture of redemption? The mystery still burns. And if you wish to uncover it, join us. Subscribe, share, and step into the story the world could never silence. In Christian memory, there is a disciple whose fate seems sealed from the very first line, Judas Iscariot. Of him, we hear no stories of conversion, no scenes of calling. He appears without introduction, without a past, almost without a voice. And yet, his end was told in every detail: coins, betrayal, death. How can we explain a character whose entrance is silence and whose exit is thunder? Of Peter, we know he left his nets. Of Matthew, that he abandoned the tax table. Of John, that he followed the Master with tenderness. But Judas has no prior story. No gospel tells where he came from or how he was chosen. It is as if he entered the story already marked by what he would do in the end. That emptiness is disturbing, innocent forgetfulness, or intentional silence. With time, the few fragments we have became a sentence. A murmur in Bethany against a woman's perfume, a bag of money under his care, the departure into the night to speak with the priests. With those scattered pieces, the portrait of the ultimate villain was raised. Was that all there was to know? Or did someone make sure only those traces would remain? Time kept a secret. In 1978, beneath the sands of Egypt, archaeologists uncovered a brittle codex, almost consumed by the centuries. When they opened it, a title shook the specialists: the Gospel of Judas. It wasn't in the Bible. It wasn't read in churches. It had been branded heretical and hidden from communities for nearly 2,000 years. Why so much fear of a manuscript? What could it contain that threatened the official memory of Christianity? In those pages, Judas is not a villain hungry for coins. He is the disciple who understands what others do not. Jesus takes him aside in secret and entrusts him with unsettling words. You will sacrifice the man who clothes me. For the Gnostic vision, the body was a prison from which the divine had to be freed. If this text told the truth, Judas did not betray. He obeyed. What tradition condemned as betrayal may have been an act of radical faithfulness. Imagine accepting such a destiny, walking knowing that the hatred of centuries would fall upon you, accepting to be the eternal villain so that a greater plan could be fulfilled. While other disciples were restored or persuaded, Judas would have carried the darkest mission, to become the necessary condemned one. The official account and the forbidden gospel face each other like two broken mirrors. One shows the traitor drowning in guilt, the other the chosen one for an incomprehensible task. In between, a fracture full of questions. Who was Judas? A man lost in ambition, or a disciple who accepted the shadow as part of obedience? Were we given the whole truth, or only the part history could bear? Judas was in the inner circle. He walked beside the Master. He sat at the table and shared the bread. He was not a stranger who appeared from outside, but one of the 12. And yet, of them all, he is the only one whose life remains hidden in shadows and whose end divides memory in two. And in that fracture begins the mystery that will accompany us through this entire story. The day falls over the stone courtyards. Voices from Galilee echo like waves, open laughter, light steps, the smell of dry nets and salted leather. Among them walks a man with another rhythm, Judas Iscariot, from Chariot in Judea. His accent sounds different. His silence is measure. He carries a linen bag tied at the belt. He doesn't look at the horizon. He looks at the road, supplies, paths, the cost of oil, the exact coin for bread. In a group of lofty visions, he keeps his feet on the ground. Among fishermen from the north, a reformed tax collector and a zealot with fire in his eyes, appears a man from the south. His name gives him away. Iscariot, the man from Chariot, a village in Judea. The difference is not just an adjective, it is a whole geography. Other markets, other squares, other rules. In the circle of the 12, bonds of origin, accent, and custom are woven. Judas sounds different, walks different, thinks different. Was that difference his first mark, or the seal of a purpose the others were not meant to carry? Each one had a voice. Peter runs, John listens, Thomas asks. Judas was given the common purse. It was not a title. It was a burden, bargaining in markets, foreseeing coin shortages, answering when someone on the road asked for help. While some argued about who would be the greatest, Judas was doing the math. While the Master spoke of the kingdom, Judas calculated the price of reaching the next village without hunger. He was not the mystic. He was the practical one. And in groups in love with vision, the practical one often seems cold.
I didn't always understand his parables at once. But if bread was missing, I knew where to buy it. If the donkey cost more in Jericho than in Bethany, I remembered it. Does that make me less of a disciple? Or simply the only one who carried the weight no one wanted to see?
A house in Bethany, a jar of nard that could feed many weeks, is broken against time. The perfume fills the room like a river and falls on the Master's head. A pure gesture, without calculation. Some saw it as worship. Judas saw it as loss. He protested that perfume could have been sold and the money given to the poor. His voice sounded cold. The evangelist John judged him as a thief. But what if that protest was the voice of the only one thinking about tomorrow? Bethany was not a quick trial. It was a clash of two logics, the waste that loves and the care that provides. In the writings, his objection stands as suspicion. In daily life, that same objection had sustained many days. Accents build invisible walls. At the table, the Galileans laughed with words Judas barely understood. He answered with short phrases, learned in harder squares where a word could cost a life. In Jerusalem, he had learned to measure himself, to watch without exposing. That caution made him different. And difference, sooner or later, demands a price.
You are not from here. I can hear it in your voice. In Judea, we learn to distrust. You want to buy? Pay more.
The arguments among the 12 were not theories. They were about the table. Who do we help first? How much do we save for tomorrow? What priority does the journey have compared to the hungry today? In those frictions, Judas was the break. Every group needs one, someone who remembers that a wineskin has a price, that a lamp without oil doesn't light sermons. But breaks do not win affection, and a break that speaks with a foreign accent loses it even faster.
Brother, your account is fair, but sometimes it hurts. Sometimes when the perfume falls, you must let it fall. Not every expense is a loss.
Perhaps the hardest role is doing the necessary without applause. No one remembers the one who held the logistics while others set hearts on fire. All remember the one who set hearts on fire even if no one knew how they would eat at dawn. Judas carried numbers among parables, schedules among miracles, foresight among impulses. Was it a flaw? Or exactly what the plan needed so the caravan would not fall apart? Imagine the circle around the fire. The Galileans sing childhood melodies. Judas listens in silence. His stories have markets and city corners, not boats and nets. The laughter of the group, that secret language built over years together, does not fully belong to him. They accept him, they need him, they do not understand him. On that edge, a man is forged, useful and alone. On the roads of the first century, carrying a common purse meant risks, thieves on narrow paths, taxes at city gates, different coins, denarii, drachmas, shekels, with values to be converted by memory. Itinerant groups depended on offerings and hospitality. Expenses were not abstract. Wine, bread, oil, lamps, lodging. Someone had to keep, count in the mind, decide. That someone in the company of the Master was Judas. Friends judge without robes or gavels. A gesture at the wrong time, a question about the cost, a raised eyebrow, and a role is fixed. Judas was left as the cold one, the one who calculates, the one who does not feel, but sometimes the one who does not feel makes sure tomorrow comes. And the same coldness that irritates at the feast prevents hunger at dawn. If Peter is rock and John is the close chest, Judas is the hinge, between impulse and substance, between what is dreamed and what is paid. He does not inspire devotional stories, but he sustains itineraries. He does not collect applause, but he ties together the days. That assigned place does not shine on scrolls, it burns on the back. Without entering past silences or invisible battles, one uneasiness remains. How does it feel to be the different one when the cause you love demands warmth and you offer care? How much does it cost to be necessary without being loved? At what point does a fair warning start to sound like suspicion? Judas was not an ornament on the list. He was the useful outsider, the practical treasurer, the man who made the everyday possible while others lifted their eyes to heaven. In a group of flames, someone had to guard the oil. But when hinges creak, everyone blames the noise and no one remembers that without them the door does not open. What no one saw that night, when the perfume filled the house and the purse felt heavier, was the cost that began to weigh on being chosen, to be different. And in that blind spot, where need is confused with distrust, the fate of a man began to close in silence. The room was heavy with the smoke of lamps and the smell of roasted lamb. Shadows danced on the walls with the rhythm of the fire as 13 men leaned over a table. The bread cracked as it was broken by the Master's hands. A solemn moment, an eternal moment. And then, the words that broke the night, "One of you will betray me." The air grew dense. Hearts pounded like drums. All looked around, but only one felt something dark slide inside him. All of Scripture beats like a battlefield. Job, tested through ruin. Daniel, witness of heavenly princes fighting over kingdoms. Revelation with dragons and angels in combat. In that invisible current, Judas was not just a weak man, he became a stage. A field where heaven claimed and darkness pressed. It was not just a human act, but a clash that went beyond all flesh. The Gospel of John says, Satan entered him. But Matthew records a puzzling word from Jesus. Friend. How can someone be called devil and friend in the same instant? The answer is that Judas became a living fracture. He was not only a traitor, he was the space where two eternities spoke at once.
I heard a whisper that promised light. Deliver him and the plan will be fulfilled. And another voice, his calling me friend, as if redemption was still possible. What heart can resist when heaven and hell tear it apart at the same time?
Job endured ruin and stayed faithful. Judas, instead, was tested in another way, to be used to open the door to the sacrifice. Job became the example of resistance. Judas, the paradox, that even darkness can serve in a greater plan. Is it not more disturbing to think that his fall was necessary, that his mistake was part of divine machinery? In the Jewish Passover, there was a tradition to leave an empty seat for the invisible guest. That night in Jerusalem, that invisible place seemed occupied. The angels watched, the forces of evil waited. The bread and the wine were no longer just symbols, they were weapons in a war decided in silence. Jesus announced the betrayal. Judas held the morsel like one who carries a destiny. The entire room burned with invisible tensions.
What you are about to do it quickly.
Jesus knew it from the beginning. He had said, "One of you is a devil." And yet he did not expel him. He did not stop him. He let him walk with them until the last breath. Why? Because redemption would not be fulfilled without a betrayer. The kingdom needed someone to open the door, and that someone was Judas. Not as an accident, but as part of the eternal script. The other disciples showed human weaknesses we can recognize: denials, doubts, flight. Judas represented something else: the border. Between the absolute obedience of Christ and the absolute rebellion of the adversary, Judas was the crossing. He was a man of flesh, but also a cosmic fracture. Not just a thief, the bridge of shadow and light. Was Judas a victim of an irresistible force, or a conscious partner in an incomprehensible plan? Did he obey the darkness, or fulfill heaven's hardest command? Isn't it more terrifying to think he was chosen to betray than to imagine him as just a thief? Judas was not only the one who betrayed with a kiss. He was the stage where two eternities measured their strength. The light called him friend. The shadow claimed him as its own. And he, with a torn heart, became the living border where heaven and hell collided. The echo of that night still resounds. What happens when a man becomes the frontier where heaven and hell fight? The moon barely peeked through heavy clouds. On the Mount of Olives, a strange silence reigned, broken only by the wind brushing the branches and the murmur of a prayer. Gethsemane was no random place. Jesus often sought refuge there with his disciples. That night, however, no friends came with prayers, but firm steps, burning torches, and unsheathed steel. Judas did not raise his voice. He did not point with his finger. He chose a kiss. In Jewish culture, it was a greeting of respect for a rabbi, a gesture of affection between disciple and teacher. Turning it into a sign for the guards made it unbearable. An intimate gesture turned into a military signal, a caress used as a dagger. From then on, the kiss of Judas would be the bitterest paradox in history: love in appearance, betrayal in essence. The Gospels describe more than an improvised crowd. John speaks of a speira, a Roman cohort, hundreds of soldiers, together with temple guards. Religious power and empire united in one operation. Swords, spears, clubs, torches shaking the gloom. The garden, once a place of prayer, became a war stage. The flickering light of the flames cast giant shadows on the olive trees, as if nature itself was witnessing the trial that had begun.
They told us, "The one he kisses, that is the man." We advanced through branches, the smoke of the torches clouding our eyes. He did not run. He did not shout. He looked straight at us. And when Judas leaned toward him, the silence weighed heavier than our weapons.
Matthew and Mark recall Judas saying, "Greetings, Rabbi." Luke adds Jesus' reply, "Do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" It was not a shout, it was a whisper made of iron. The whole garden became a tribunal. The gesture meant to express affection was exposed as the very face of betrayal. In that instant, history changed forever. The kiss in the dark set in motion the chain that would lead to the cross. And you, who have walked with us until this moment, do you dare to keep uncovering the secrets that remain hidden? Subscribe now, share this journey with others, and don't miss the next episodes. Because the story of Judas does not end here. It reveals an echo that still resounds in us. Confusion exploded among the disciples. Peter drew a sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Jesus stopped him. "Put your sword away," he ordered. "Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" The contrast was brutal. Judas betraying with a kiss, Peter fighting with violence, and Jesus responding with calm. 3 paths in one moment: betrayal, violence, and surrender. Today, in Gethsemane, ancient olive trees remain. Some experts believe their roots may go back 2,000 years. At the foot of the slope, a cave still survives, once an oil press that gave the place its name, Gethsemane, oil press. The symbolism is inevitable. There, where olives were crushed until they poured out their essence, Jesus was pressed in anguish. And in that very place, Judas carried out the surrender that would change history.
I saw the torches dance in Judas's eyes. The kiss was brief, just a touch, but it broke our hearts. Hands stretched out, ropes tightened. We ran like frightened children, leaving the master behind.
The authorities knew what they were doing. They did not dare arrest him in the temple, nor in the streets crowded with pilgrims. They chose the darkness of the garden, far from the multitudes who revered him. Judas did not only hand over the man, he handed over the exact hour, the perfect place, the favorable silence. It was not just personal betrayal, it was precise strategy. When the torches moved away, the garden fell silent again. The olive trees remained as mute witnesses of the scene that broke a circle of friendship. It was not outsiders who pointed to the master, but a man of trust, a friend at the shared table. That is the wound that never heals. The betrayal did not come from outside, it came from within. In a single night, Gethsemane turned from refuge of prayer into stage of surrender. And in that brief kiss, Judas was written forever into the memory of the world. Was it an act of hatred, a cold calculation, or the fulfillment of a destiny greater than him? History does not answer, but every time the word betrayal is spoken, the echo returns to the garden, where a kiss in the dark lit the chain that led to the cross. The betrayal did not begin with swords or soldiers, but with the echo of coins falling on a table. 30 pieces of silver changed hands. There were no cheering witnesses, no solemn speeches, only a cold clinking in the dark. That was the price of Judas. But here the question rises. Why 30? What did that number mean in the ancient world? In the law of Moses, 30 shekels of silver was the compensation to be paid for the accidental death of a slave. Exodus 21:32. The message from the priests was clear and cruel. They valued the master as if he were a servant without freedom. The figure was no accident. It was a calculated insult. Centuries earlier, the prophet Zechariah had written, "They weighed out my wages, 30 pieces of silver, the precious price at which they valued me." Zech 11:12. The act of Judas rang like a dark fulfillment of that vision. The shepherd rejected by his people, sold for a sum that symbolized contempt. Archaeologists have found coins of that very type, Tyrian shekels used in the temple because of their high purity of silver. On one side, the image of Melkart, a Phoenician god equated with Heracles. On the other, an imperial eagle. They were pagan coins, yet ironically required for worship. The betrayal was paid with foreign silver, stamped with alien gods, making the irony sharper still. The sacred was sold with the impure.
Pilgrims brought Roman denarii, but the temple demanded Tyrian shekels, clean coin, almost pure. 30 of those pieces shone like mirrors, but this time they did not buy lambs for the altar. They bought the lamb himself.
30 shekels equaled, in the 1st century, about 4 months of a laborer's wages. With that sum, one could secure bread for a family for a season or buy a few head of cattle. It was not wealth, it was not misery, it was the price of the common, of the reachable. And perhaps that is what makes it unbearable, the redemption of the world betrayed for a sum anyone could imagine holding in their hands. Picture Judas clutching the leather bag, the metal clashing inside, the dry sound each time he moved. They were not just coins, they were the tangible proof of a pact that could not be undone. A constant reminder that there was no way back.
30. No more, no less. The price of a slave. The price of a brother. The price of my own soul.
When Judas tried to return it, the priests refused. It is not lawful to put it into the treasury since it is blood money. Matt 27:6. What had circulated for years in the temple was now untouchable. The contradiction was obvious. Those same coins served for worship, but by touching betrayal, they became defiled. The money that sealed the surrender turned into cursed silver. In the Middle Ages, it was said the 30 coins survived, passing from hand to hand as cursed relics. Some legends claimed they provoked wars and disasters, that kings and merchants hid them in fear. Beyond myth, one thing is certain: they became a universal symbol, a reminder that the sacred can be sold for the immediate, and that the price of betrayal always seems smaller than it should. The 30 coins never appeared in archaeological treasures, nor were they preserved as relics. They vanished into history, but their metallic echo has never stopped sounding. It was not the price of a slave, nor of land, nor of cattle. It was the price of broken trust, of friendship betrayed, of faith turned into calculation. And that cursed price did not vanish into the air. It was driven into the earth. With it, a field was bought, a ground that to this day holds the memory of betrayal. And the question that still follows us is inevitable. How much is a man's loyalty worth? How much does the sacred cost when measured with the metal of fear? Dawn paints the hills south of Jerusalem red. The wind stirs dust over a stony slope where the grass bends as if afraid to remain there. The locals name it in a low voice, Akeldama, the field of blood. No one digs wells in that soil. No one builds houses. They say the ground absorbed the shame of a man, and since then it refuses to forget. The end of Judas did not remain only in words, it was nailed into a cursed field that still speaks today. The Gospels do not agree on his death. Matthew presents him hanged in solitude. A rope, a tree, a silence broken only by his own weight. Acts describes another scene, public, grotesque. Judas falls in the field bought with his betrayal money, and his body bursts open as if the earth itself rejected him. 2 deaths, 2 funerals, none definitive. As if memory did not know whether to hide his shame in silence or expose it as spectacle.
30 pieces of silver returned, unfit for the temple treasury. With them, a field was purchased for the burial of strangers.
With time, the stories grew more cruel. Papias of Hierapolis in the 2nd century described him swollen, deformed, worms devouring his flesh, unable to pass through a narrow street. Tradition could not accept an ordinary ending. Judas had to become a monster, a living example of what happens to the one who betrays the Son of God. No one knows for sure where Judas tied the rope. Some placed it on a sycamore, others on a fig tree by the road, others on an olive tree in Gethsemane. The tree was never certain, and perhaps that uncertainty was intentional, as if nature itself refused to carry his memory. Each version pointed to a different trunk, trying to tie shame to a place, as if guilt could be nailed into wood instead of wandering among men. The ground of his end was not a metaphor. It was a legal purchase, a public deed, an official record, a plot for burying foreigners. For centuries, travelers avoided it. Medieval chronicles tell that the wind there seemed to carry whispers, as if the earth hid voices that could not be silenced. The paradox is brutal. The disciple who shared bread at the Master's table ended buried among strangers, in land marked for those without home or lineage. The coins of Judas could not return to the temple. They were impure. The priests decided to turn them into land, buying a lot outside the walls. It was not only a financial act, it was a symbolic judgment. Turning coins into soil was a way to lock the scandal inside a perimeter. The traitor was reduced to coordinates, to a notarial deed, to geography. Jerusalem neither honored nor erased him. It filed him away in stone and dust. From Judas, we have no tomb, no relics, no epitaph. His memory remains in 3 mute traces. The coins, rejected and turned into a field. The rope, or the fall, sign of disputed deaths. The deed of purchase, where betrayal was fixed in a document. While the other disciples are remembered at altars, Judas is reduced to dirty objects and an empty field. With time, Akeldama became a cemetery for foreigners. There were buried those who died far from their people, without inheritance or memory in Jerusalem. The traitor ended, even in death, among the marginalized. Neither among his own, nor among the 12, nor in the veneration of saints. Only among the anonymous.
Here no one asks names. We dig, we place, we cover. The field does not distinguish traitors from innocents. It only swallows what others do not want to remember.
The figure of Judas recalls another marked from the beginning. Cain, the brother who lifted his hand against his own blood and was condemned to wander. Both carry a mark impossible to erase. Both are figures of the border, neither fully alive nor fully dead, neither remembered nor forgotten, always wandering in human memory. Through the centuries, Akeldama became a stop for pilgrims. Some visited with fear, others with morbid curiosity. But all agreed that field was proof that betrayal does not vanish. And even today, south of Jerusalem, there remains a place called Akeldama, reddish stones, dry weeds, an uneasy silence. It is not metaphor or legend. It is geography that still burns.
You will not find my tomb nor my absolution. You will not find a prayer that carries my name. I was the field no one wanted to own, the coin no one accepted, the shadow all avoided. Cursed, yes, but necessary.
The fate of Judas did not end with the rope nor with the coins. It was sealed in the land. His memory is not honored in temples nor erased in oblivion. It was fixed in a barren field, bought with stained money, destined for those who did not belong. There his shadow rests, without grave, without epitaph, without human pardon. And the question remains, disturbing like an open wound. Was Judas a condemned villain, or the dark stone that, without glory, upheld the architecture of redemption? Some names echo louder than others. Judas is one of them, his shadow dividing faith and leaving questions that refuse to fade. We have traced his path, through betrayal and mystery, to the very edge of history. But this story is only one piece of a much greater journey. We have uncovered the fire of Elijah, the first fall of Adam and Eve, the radiance and downfall of Lucifer, the flood of Noah, the visions of the apocalypse, and the terrible deaths of the 12 apostles. Each one reveals another fragment of the mystery that still burns within Scripture. If these stories move you, don't let them pass into silence. Like, share, and subscribe, not just to follow us, but to keep these voices alive and growing, to walk with others who seek what lies beyond the veil of history. The shadows still speak. Together, we will keep listening.